there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
Gigantic U.S. construction corporation Bechtel finally gets its no-bid contract for a highway in Macedonia, and then turns around and insults Macedonia and Macedonians, calling them, quote, North Macedonians, unquote. Contract mafioso murder erupts in downtown Skopje among the various Albanian drug gangs, or is it weapons smuggling gangs? And then policemen are beaten up by similar gangs. NATO now refers to Macedonians as, quote, North Macedonians, unquote, and Gabriel Escobar, a deputy United States Secretary of State, calls Macedonians, quote, Orthodox people, unquote, when comparing them to, quote, Albanians, unquote, in Macedonia. Is this official U.S. State Department policy now? We'll discuss all of this and more in this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Chilimanov in Skopje, Orthodox Macedonia.
I am writing an article about this, of course, and it's true. Most Macedonians are Orthodox. That is not untrue. But to call them instead of calling Macedonians Macedonians, he calls them Orthodox people. Why? I think he did that on purpose. That's a preview shadowing of my column. But let's start with Bechtel because that seems to be the big deal this past week. Granted, it's gigantic U.S. construction company that seems to get bids in countries where the U.S. military has been, or there's been a significant U.S. president. So I want to get the insults out of the way first, then we can talk about the no bid and how that all relates to Macedonia. So they put out a press release on March 9, I think, and 4 times in the press release they say we are delighted to work with the North Macedonian government. They talk about hiring.
Really rubbed it in.
Yeah, hiring North Macedonians, the North Macedonian Minister for Transport, and North Macedonian government teams. I mean, come on, people. What is Angela? What's her name? Aguilar, our ambassador. Is she not doing her job and kind of coaching these people? It's just, it's anyway. So.
No, but it's much worse, actually. You give this money. Everybody knows that Bechtel works for the State Department, and this is the bribe you pay for either for the U.S. not to tackle you, not to give you any grief, not to color revolution or anything, or if you want to advance somebody with regard to some of your neighbors, some of your national interests, you give them money. This is the render unto Caesar the bribe you give them, and the least they're supposed to do for this amount of money is, they should be helping Macedonia with regard to Bulgaria. They should be helping us, relax some of the conditions with regard to Greece, since we're not getting any of the perks from the Prespa Treaty, like EU membership. So, if you pay 1.3, 1.7 is now billion, that's the starting price, euros to the U.S. government, you're supposed to get something for this, and not, the same company calling you North Macedonia and the director, the State Department calling you Orthodox people and, just rubbing stuff in.
Yeah. So let's talk about what was is 1.7 billion euros, you said?
Well, I think they're at parity now, the euros to dollars.
1.5. I mean, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. So
who's counting?
So
1.3, but this does not include purchasing the land where the highways are supposed to go. So it covers the highway from. It's our north-south axis is developed well. We have highway to Belgrade, highway almost, the border is closed with Kosovo from Skopje. There is highway in Kosovo. We have highway to Solun. So basically the north-south is covered. But we don't have an east-west highway, and we don't have a lateral highways to Strumica and Bitola. Bitola is especially important.
Yes.
So this thing, we have highway from Skopje until Gostivar. Although only the first section, Skopje to Tetovo, looks like something. We have with the Chinese, we're building a highway from Kičevo to Ohrid, close to the border with Albania. So now this new deal will cover a small section with Albania to Struga, practically to Ohrid. It's actually not that small, it's still 20 kilometers. Then there is, the Chinese are building from Ohrid to Kičevo, which is about 40-50 kilometers, over rough terrain, and this was blocked by the SDSM government. They're arresting the transportation minister who made the deal. They destroyed the construction company which was building this. So this project has been blocked for 10 years now. We're building it for 6 years. It's been blocked. It would have been finished by now, no problem. Then there is a horrible section, mountainous terrain from Kičevo to Gostivar. This is the main part of the deal with Bechtel, and it's going to cost us 560 million out of the 1.3 billion which were discussed, which were signed on to. Then there is, so this covers until Gostivar. Then Gostivar to Tetovo, as I said, there is a highway, but it's very narrow. It's just 2 lanes. Even though it's the Polog Valley, it's very flat, very easy to build there. But we built it after independence, but it's pretty poor quality of highway. So now the plan is that here Bechtel is going to build a completely new highway. So I think this one is either being demolished or it's going to be used for one of the sections, and then the other is going to be built anew. So this brings us to Tetovo. There is a highway from Tetovo to Skopje. They will build a highway from Skopje to the border with Kosovo. That's like 10 kilometers, but Bechtel is already building this, or through intermediaries. This was started under SDSM and DUI, and they're getting nowhere. They have trouble building the 50% of the initial 2-kilometer section. They managed to divide 10 kilometers into 3 sections, and they can't build. They're building half of the first section, so which comes down to 1,000 meters. They're still building it for several years. And they will build a highway between Prilep and Bitola through the Pelagonia Valley, which is very flat terrain, very easy terrain to build over. And then hopefully we have a long-lasting, another major construction deal started by Gruevski and completely blocked by SDSM, is from Prilep to Negotino, to the highway, to the north-south highway. So if we build the one between Prilep and Bitola through Bechtel, and if we finish the one already started by Gruevski from Prilep to Negotino, then we will have a highway to Bitola and a highway to Ohrid. And then we still need to build from Skopje to Kumanovo. There is a highway, and Gruevski projected a highway from Kumanovo to the border with Bulgaria. But I'm not sure. SDSMC, they're building something. I haven't seen proper reports. They haven't visited the construction site, or I haven't seen pictures. So I don't really know what's happening there. But the idea would be to have a highway from Ohrid, the border with Albania, over through Skopje, Kumanovo, and then to the border with Bulgaria, to Kyustendil. This would be the the east-west corridor. Now they said it's going to be 1.3 billion, but then they told us this does not include the purchasing of the land which will be needed, and about 50% of the land is privately owned, and they can owners can block this in court. It can take forever. The government today said that they're allotting 280 million to buy the land, so we are getting to 1.6 billion, but the owner of the land has a say in this, so it probably will not be one. And this goes through Albanian land, and they will be overrepresented in the negotiation team and in the government, so they can, they can completely block. A village can completely block the construction, and they can extort the government, or they can jointly extort the government, with the help of the Albanian coalition partner, whoever is the local feudal lord there, so they can really ramp up the prices here. And there is no way this is going to cost us just 1.6 billion.
Well, yeah, all no government project in any country around the world ever comes in at the cost that they say it's going to come in, and it always is much higher, no matter who. And of course, the big thing about this is no matter what the price, whether it's 1.3, 1.6, 2.6, 3.6, it's a no bid contract. So they just went out and said, okay, you've got it. And to be fair, of course, this is it's a U.S. Turkish consortium, Bechtel Inca. But still, it's a reward of sorts, I suppose, to the government for bending over and doing what Kale and the State Department has demanded.
No, it's not. It's not a reward. It would be reward for the government if, if we had a bid contract like we had for the section of the North-South highway around Demirkapia Gorge. So practically, Gruevski was able to negotiate. It was like 300-400 million, and Gruevski was able to negotiate with the EU that the EU pays half for this. And then he went around. He wanted to make a point that the EU is not buying him with this money. That he's not going to make concessions or national issues for this money. So he named the highway Alexander the Great. As a Greek company won the bid and was building this. So if you have a bid, then the EU it will probably go to an EU company, and then the EU would give you the money for it, half of it. I mean, this is how Greece built its highways. This is how Bulgaria is building its highways. A reward for the government would have been 50%, 70% EU funding for this project. But instead, we are, because the US government installed the SDSM DUI government, and they spent, what was our estimate, about 60 million, what is known in State Department USAID funding for the colored revolution. And they want a return on their investment, and this is how they're now extorting Macedonia, which by every right should expect infrastructure funding for the EU for everything, for all of this bending over backwards, which you mentioned, and getting nothing in return. At least we should get infrastructure funding, but instead we can't sign a much cheaper deal with the Chinese, as we did under Gruevski, when Gruevski realized that EU funding is drying out since he wouldn't bend over backwards himself. So he went to the Chinese, and the Chinese said, fine, this is peanuts for us, no problem. And he got a much cheaper deal for the highways with Chinese funding. And listen, I had this, I've mentioned this, I think, in the podcast, I've written about this. I had Phil Ricker, our friend from, who, after he was ambassador in Macedonia, after he went back to DC as the Balkan undersecretary. And, he openly told me, I was asking him once, what's the reason in the early stages of funding the colored revolution, the NGOs, the protests, this was 2012, 2013 sometimes, and he told me, he would say the usual stuff, like it's the corruption, it's the human rights issues, blah, blah, blah. And then as item number 3 in outlining problems the State Department had with Gruevski, he would tell me, it's the infrastructure spending, you're giving it to the Chinese, not to Bechtel. And his approach was like, I say this to Milo Djukanovic, the president of Montenegro as well. He was also building some Chinese highway, and the US wanted the money to go to Bechtel. And he said, look, Milo, you have a watch. Is it a real Rolex? Implying, of course, that Milo is running cigarettes, smuggling, and all other businesses, so he has a Rolex. So is it a Chinese Rolex, or is it an original? So, you want a Chinese highway or a American. So, it would be better quality if it's American. But it's very clear that after we had that major scandal in Kosovo, when Kosovo signed a deal with Bechtel, which then exploded in its price, doubled, tripled, I don't know what. And then the U.S. ambassador to Kosovo, Christopher Dell, was immediately afterwards appointed director of Bechtel for, I think, a whole section of Africa, like all, I don't know, subtropical Africa, Equatorial, I don't know what Africa it was. And then he was named director, I think, of Bechtel for Mozambique or something. He still works in African infrastructure. So yeah, it's very clear that the ambassadors, the embassy hands who will make this deal happen, have a very good future career in Bechtel, because they're literally taking away, like, what's it, like 20% of the Macedonian GDP in one fell swoop. So the best option is EU fund, EU paying half or 2/3 or whatever. Second worst option is China paying for, going to the Chinese. The worst option is getting the most expensive highway imaginable from the US government, no bid contract, no EU support, and at least, okay, and in this case, at least you get you get meetings with the State Department. You can use this leverage to have some influence in the State Department, and you can have a ask from them. But our government appointed the Deputy Prime Minister Artan Grubi to run the negotiations, and we had dozens of meetings, Grubi with Kate Burns, Grubi with Aguilar now, and he's the one pushing the whole thing. So we're paying the entire country, but Macedonians more, because there are more Macedonians in this country. We're paying a king's ransom to the Americans, to the US government for ruling over us, instead of the US as the capital-rich hegemon giving us the capital, and we as an infrastructure poor, but still some workforce, blue-collar people just building the highways with American capital. We're giving our capital, which we don't have, to the US government for this. And instead of getting a geopolitical foot in the door, like we can demand something that somebody lays off, the Bulgarians, the Albanians, the Greeks, so that somebody gets off our back for something. It's the Albanians getting, with their own money, they're buying even more leverage and influence in Washington, even though the Albanians obviously already have 10 times more influence in Washington than the Macedonians. So we're literally paying for further lobbying for the Albanian nationalist causes in Washington. It will not be even a nominal Macedonian, like Kovačevski securing a meeting in Washington with Blinken or whoever, because after spending all this money, it will be Artan Grubi having a meeting there. That's the the worstest part. We are triple screwed with the deal.
It's all going to end in tears.
It's a disaster.
Which is why you have to laugh, I guess. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, a couple of things, and that's a great explanation there. First of all, back on the Chinese. Of course, the Chinese would demand something as well. Anyway, that's the way great power politics works. So, but here we are coming up on 32 years of Macedonia's independence as a modern-day nation-state, and there still are huge sections of the country without a decent highway. And of course, I've been around so long. I remember the Skopje-Tetovo when it was one direction, one lane one direction, and one lane the other direction. And of course, now it's much better. As you mentioned, the Demirkapia to Gevgelia, which Gruevski arranged, is a very nice highway. But then you got these, and I've been down. It seems like it's been 10 years. It feels like it's been 10 years. Maybe it's less. Driving from Skopje to Ohrid by way of Tetovo and Gostivar and Straja, etc. And it just seems like that the portions of that highway have been worked on forever, which they have. So, and again, yes, it's all about, well, not all about, but the fact that there's the no-bid contracts, and then who's in charge of these. It's Artan Grubi and the power, as we've talked about here on this podcast many times, the number of ethnic Albanians that are now in either ministers or deputy ministers, which I think is about equal to the number of Macedonians and others. So, well, it's, ultimately it's up to the Macedonian people if they want to stand for this, or if they want to literally, if they will just take this line down, or if they're going to stand up and do something about it. So,
actually, it's not anymore. We had the prime minister go to parliament, and he said, The people were opposed to Prespa, the people were opposed to Ohrid before, they're opposed now to the French proposal on Bulgaria. If we listen to the people, where would we be? We would not be in NATO, we would not be where we are now in this beautiful position we are. So he essentially said, screw the people, I don't need to have the consent of the government, we have to advance the ball. He was talking about Bulgaria, but, just write in your favorite concession of the day.
Well, in earlier times in the world, if he had said that, he probably wouldn't have gotten out of there alive. But
yeah.
Well, that's too bad. He of course is better than you, better than everybody else, better than all of us. So,
yeah.
He knows what's best. So. All right. I want to, since we're kind of talking about the State Department and things like that, I touch real quick on Gabriel Escobar, who is a U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary and been meddling in the Balkans and in Macedonia for a long time. He did this interview with a publication called Pavlovich Today. I don't know who she is. She's new to me. She's I guess a Serbian journalist.
Serbian girl covering the State Department.
Yeah, based in Washington, D.C. And so it was a wide-ranging interview, mostly about Serbia and Kosovo, but then they went to the other countries as well. And Escobar says that Macedonia is, quote, a true example of peaceful coexistence between Albanians and Orthodox people. Of course, he used the N-word when he just described Macedonia. I just didn't want to put that in there. But it's a new low. It's interesting because, we see on the Twitters people using the Macedonian flag emoji instead of the word Macedonian. And as one of our mutual friends on the Twitters pointed out, the Macedonian flag is not an adjective; it's a symbol. So, but this is really quite a new low to call Macedonians as the Orthodox people. I mean, you got to be a pretty audacious prick to do that, and he knows damn well what the adjective is, and he chose that deliberately. So, I think people that are listening should call the U.S. Embassy on Kale or call the Macedonian government, and especially members of the media should ask the State Department and the embassy and the Macedonian government, is this official U.S. policy now to refer to Macedonians as, quote, Orthodox people, unquote? It's just kind of amazing. And then, kind of following on with that, we all remember Hoyt Yee, the meddling and middling State Department official who would often come to Macedonia and basically tell Macedonians how awful they are. And you found this, that he's now Senior Vice President of Global Affairs at Contour Global PLC, which I believe is an energy company. And they're based in Britain. I think he works in New York City. But where is one of their major projects? Bulgaria. Where it produces energy which goes to neighboring countries such as Greece, Turkey, Macedonia, and Serbia. So it's just an example of these State Department officials who work in the region and then go to work for very large corporations, whether they're American, British, or whatever, that also work in the region. So.
Yeah, Bulgaria is one of the few countries in the region which has excess energy at this point because they have a nuclear plant. They didn't listen to the EU to close the whole thing down, and they still kept half of it or 2/3 of it operating. So this is a large coal plant which they have in the center of the country.
Where's Greta?
Which this Contour, exactly, which Contour runs. And on our side, our government practically sabotaged our own coal production. We ran into the Ukraine war, into the crisis with almost no coal on stock because Zaev kept saying that we're going to close down the coal mine, listening to Greta, we're going to replace it with green energy. And now Zaev, Akhmeti, Kovachevsky, they all own energy companies, energy trading companies. So practically they collapsed domestic production, made energy much more expensive for the private sector. They're subsidizing households through the budget, but the private sector has to buy electricity on the free market, and they have to import it from somewhere. So Zaev and Akhmeti, their children have set up trading companies, and they're helpfully offering electricity from where it can be had. And Hoyti, their friend who put them in power, is helpfully selling them this electricity at much inflated prices from the Bulgarian coal plants. So they're sabotaging our own country so they can make a quick buck on through imports, through a crisis situation. And then on top of this, since there is a crisis, they really developed a taste for a crisis management of the economy. So practically they have, during COVID, they would close down these sectors of the industry, then negotiate opening them. They would directly negotiate with the restaurant owners, with the supermarket owners. When do we open? How long do we work? And this obviously very affects the bottom line of the companies. So they had every industry coming to them begging for, to be allowed to work. And the government was very, sometimes they would oblige, sometimes they wouldn't, depending on how much bribe they would be offered. So now the Ukraine war is the next thing which offers them to make the same relationship, power relationship with the private sector. So now there is no electricity, there is very little domestic production. Companies say will go bankrupt if these energy prices continue. Mm-hmm. So the government offered them subsidized energy. But then after a while, they said, but you didn't lower the prices of your products by enough. After we gave you subsidized electricity, the company said, listen, we have a bunch of other expenses. You're hiking the minimum wage. Oil is through the roof. So labor costs are through the roof. Everything else is becoming more expensive. Inflation, and the government said, okay, so we will regulate the price of bread initially. We had shortages of bread for a few days until the bakery said, okay, we'll start producing some quantity under the new price. There are still intermittent shortages here and there, but the companies are preparing a lawsuit against the government, which will probably also be some kind of a negotiated deal. Once this government collapses, I can expect that the companies are promised, once we are out, once Wimmer is in, we will expedite this through courts and we will welcome Wimmer in power with a bill of, 50 million or something for damages caused to the milling and baking industries. Mm-hmm. And now the government wants to do the same thing to the companies selling pasta and producers of dairy products, milk and cheeses. So they're openly blackmailing these companies. We will you have to lower your prices by X, by 10%, and then we will freeze these prices starting, the end of this month, I think. So it's open extortion of businesses under the guise of, there is war, there is crisis, there is electricity crisis. We helped you out as a government a few months ago after we caused a crisis in the energy sector, and we are profiting privately. Zaev and Akhmetić are selling through importing electricity. Kovacevsky has a share in a company that produces solar panels, and he's handing out licenses for industrial solar plants, offering, if you buy his solar panels, you can get a permit to build a plant, after which the government will mandate purchasing of your electricity at a much inflated price because it's green energy, So they're profiting from this privately. They damage the entire economy and the households. And then, okay, we help the businesses a little, but because of this now we are a shareholder in your businesses and we can set your prices and regulate your prices. So it's complete gangsterism. Open gangsterism.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good transition to this next subject, but but also the government officials are still involved in the cannabis business as well, right?
That's not that hot anymore because they're now making extortion money from bread and cheese. It's much easier if you can fix the price of these products. You don't have to go with exotic plants and the actual criminal market.
Well, it just goes to show that you can take any product and turn it into a mafia business. Actually, over here, the cartels in Mexico have been involved in illicit avocados. Exactly.
Yeah. They're brutally killing people in Mexico over avocados.
Over avocados, exactly. So, but speaking of killing, so you know, the crime in Macedonia has gone up under the current Syriza Dewey government. No surprise there. But the level of the audacity, I suppose, is the right word, of what's going on. So last week, two mafioso figures were killed in basically downtown Skopje, essentially. And as I understand it, the perpetrators, the attackers, came in. They were wearing police uniforms and with automatic weapons, and they shot them in the head and then fled, probably to Kosovo. Just kind of extraordinary, really, how brazen that is.
Yep.
And then a couple of police a few days later were beat up by another gang. So for the first attack, have they found the killers, or any more word on that?
No.
Of course not. Yeah. And
we were suspecting, because the timing was interesting. I mentioned Artan Grubias. He's negotiating the highways. He's signing deals with construction companies who are then getting a cut of the highways. So practically he had a deal. His friend bought a hotel on Popova Shapka, and a ski resort, from the company that got one of the highways, which is building one of the highways, and will probably get much more of the highway construction deals with Granite.
Mm-hmm.
His brother then bought some real estate in downtown Skopje for pennies on the dollar. So he's becoming a big power player in these deals. And he's facing a rebellion in Chir, in the part of Skopje where he used to be powerful, influential, through running hooligan football gangs.
Mm-hmm.
So another group, they used to be split, like Artan would be more like a nationalist, secularist, pro-American guy. The other guys would be more like Islamic in their demeanor, or how do we call it? And so they're now trying to oust him, this group, and they're leaving the party. These are the two votes that Dewey lost in parliament after the election of the new government. So it was suspected that these guys had something to do with the feuding in Dewey, that they were on one or other side of this divide, because they're drug guys who actually, one of them actually survived a very prominent assassination attempt in 2019, when a group of people opened fire on him, again from automatic weapons, in the Alexander Palace Hotel.
Wow.
Even more prominent place. Now they were killed in a shisha bar, even though an expensive and posh shisha bar in the bazaar. He survived like a literal, movie-style shooting in the hotel. There is still not clear, like, whether these guys were working for Artan, whether they rebelled against him, who organized the hit. We widely believe that they are linked with a very powerful, with the Sheval from Grčac, the powerful drug lord from the village of Grčac, just west of Skopje. They are a prominent mafia drug cartel in Macedonia at the moment. So this was the one assumption, that it's both drug-related but also political, as Dewey gangs are fighting with each other over control of the center of Skopje, this central neighborhood in Skopje.
Well, I have no problem if they kill each other, literally, but the danger of innocent people getting hurt in the meantime goes up every time there's an attack like this. So, well. And
Zaev is getting involved as well.
In the shooting?
Yeah. So Zaev had, if it's the political angle, not just the drug angle, there was a major development politically in that, the government brought in the Alliance of Albanians, but lost the Alternative Party and lost these two members of parliament from the Artan Grubi's rival gang in Dewey, in Skopje. So Zaev had over the Alternative Party, which is now a critic of the government after being in the government for a year. Zaev had the leader of this party in Strumica. After he had Ali Ahmeti visit him in Strumica like a year and a half ago. Apparently, no, less. Apparently negotiating the removal of Kovachevsky from government and, bringing in Vemero and Dewey in the government. So he's openly now scheming against Kovachevsky. He wants his party back. He wants to be in the government again. He feels that he's underrepresented and that his people, remaining people in the government, are not getting enough of the deals and of the scheming and everything. So he had Gashi in Strumica, and we have an open challenge to the government to, Gashi is counted in the opposition camp. So the government has about 64, 65 seats in parliament. The threat here is that Zaev will take 5, 10 people from SDSM, which he could easily after bankrolling the party for a decade and running it for so long. So this is his challenge now to the Kovachevsky government, that he will bring them down with the help of the Albanians, but especially with the faction in SDSM. And this can easily translate into a shooting war if we get down to control of territory in the Albanian neighborhoods.
Well, a preview of coming attractions.
Yep.
Wow. Well, that is sad. Ultimately, that's the only word for it. And it's the ordinary people that suffer because of these scumbags.
I just know not to go to the church yet.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
And hopefully that would be enough of a precaution.
Yeah. Well, these things have a tendency to spill over and expand. So.
Yeah, of course. It's not gonna. It's not a safe place to live. I feel dirty, paying taxes now for this open plunder through Bechtel and Artan Grubi. I feel unsafe, obviously. Yeah, it's not a good place to be at anymore. I mean,
well, let's
put it at that.
Let's move on to another subject that'll make us all feel bad as well, and that is so today this is actually episode 153 of the Macedonian Content Farmers podcast, and we're recording this on Monday, March 13, and it was just 2 days ago that Macedonia commemorated the 80th anniversary of the deportation of Macedonia's almost the entire Jewish population of Macedonia. 7,144 Macedonian Jews to Nazi death camps by the Bulgarians, and of course this is an issue that the Bulgaria and Macedonia, an additional issue that has been going on throughout this whole time of discussing the friendship agreement, etc., and Macedonia or Bulgaria's effective veto on Macedonia. So Stevo Pendorovsky, the president, I'll give him credit. He said that if there's going to be reconciliation between Macedonia and Bulgaria, then Bulgaria needs to fess up basically and take ownership of this, because the Bulgarians were the ones that deported the Jews of Macedonia to I think it was Treblinka death camp.
Treblinka, yeah.
And of course he says this over the weekend, and the Bulgarians, of course, erupt in anger and condemnation and yada yada yada. So, what is the latest on that?
Yeah, I don't know what he. It was a pretty harsh statement from Pendarovsky at this point. He's playing hot and cold with the Bulgarians. I mean, demanding that they come out and apologize. They would give statements in the past. The Bulgarian position usually is, obviously Bulgaria saved 50,000 Jews in Bulgaria proper. But this was largely because, so the story goes that once the Bulgarians, the Jews in Bulgaria realized what's happening to their brethren who were the first to be deported from Macedonia and Aegean Macedonia and Pirot, this sliver of Serbia, they went panicked, obviously, to the Bulgarian government, to the Tsar. The Tsar, he kept hiding from the German ambassador to one ski lodge to another. And Bulgaria lost the Tsar. He died during the war after meeting Hitler, allegedly because he wouldn't go along with the full deportation, only deported the Jews from the occupied territories. They have the formal position of Bulgaria is, we are very proud that we saved our Jews, and we regret that we were unable to save the Jews in these territories who were not our citizens. We were just administering the territories. But there is some division in their camps, so there would be like more left-wing, more socialist, I guess, historians, politicians who would say, yeah, we need to assume blame for this, for the organizing the deportation. I'm pretty sure that our government will cut a deal at one point with Bulgaria to blame it on local authorities in Macedonia, because our government is desperate to negotiate a deal where Bulgaria will not insist on a negative portrayal of the partisan struggle in our history, which is the only part of history that the left here cares about. And I'm pretty sure they will give away everything else, like Goca Delchov. They will accept the wording that the national liberation movement in the 19th, 20th century, early 20th century were all Bulgarians. And they will accept that Bulgaria does not have too much blame for the deportations, so long as they are allowed to keep a positive portrayal of Tito, the partisans, the Communist Party, etc. This is my feeling that we still haven't gotten to these sections of history, but I feel this will be they're literally negotiating with Bulgaria how to phrase different sections of history. There were some Jewish representatives, like some Simon Wiesenthal types who worked in his organization, who were pretty tough on Bulgaria in their statements, pretty aggressive. And yeah, Pendarovsky was out there, and he's now reaping a lot of condemnation from Bulgarian politicians. But I guess he believes he can do it now, while we still don't know what the next government will look like after the elections, once it's clear if there will be like a liberal government of Kirill Petkov or old-style government of Gerben, the socialists, maybe with them, or maybe even the nationalists, who knows. Then we'll see what happens. I guess he'll be more careful once there is somebody in charge in Bulgaria.
Yeah, that's right. Their elections are the first weekend, I believe, of April, so we're coming up in about 3 weeks from now. You mentioned the Simon Wiesenthal thinner. Efrem Zurov, apparently, who was with the center in Jerusalem, was at the event in Skopje and said, and I quote, "Bulgaria is trying to deny that it had any role in the deportations when they were responsible for the deaths of these people." That's pretty bold. So he's directly blaming Bulgaria on this, and he says it's a form of Holocaust distortion. So we'll just kind of follow that.
I'd rather not play politics with this. It's pretty. Yeah. It doesn't end well. I mean, it's really a big issue to be using I was now describing it in the day-to-day political infighting context, and it's a bit, everything is politics, everything is day-to-day politics. We use history for daily political gains and defeats and battles, but this is a bit, a bit too much. And even Jewish representatives would do this. I mean, I would notice in the past like a division between the Jewish community in Macedonia and in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, they support the narrative, of course, that Bulgaria saved its own population. That they have been saved. They have held high offices and have been a valued part of Bulgaria. And I would sometimes see them, tell our Jewish community, okay, let's not raise it to